I'm not sure if Mr. Goyal lied or he was misled. And I don't know which one is worse for India. Here is a man entrusted with responsibility to ensure that he represents the people of India, and what he's saying is exactly against the interest of the people of India. He is permitting, under for what reasons and under what pressure I don't know, GM food into India. He has crossed the red line that currently exists for GM in India, and GM is entering India. No, sorry, Mr. Goyal, you are not right, and perhaps, and most certainly actually, you're not telling the truth.
So you're coming around to saying that he lied?
Well, he did. It's so clear and it's in large bold letters on the wall.
So there is inconsistency in India's science and in India's policies.
That's right.
And the Indian people are the ones who are losing out as a result.
Well, farmers are losing out in a way because their productivity is 1/3 of the productivity that could have been.
And so your advice to the minister is, please get the science right.
I would say that when scientific tests have been done and GEAC has approved, then the policymakers must respect their own agencies which are scientific. The rest is all politics or ideology, it's not science. And unless your agriculture is science-based, your future will remain bleak.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Today we focus on a specific aspect of the India-US trade deal. Has India been successful in ensuring that genetically modified produce or its derivatives are not given access to the Indian market? The government insists that is the case, but could there be room for doubt? That's the key issue I shall discuss today. My first guest is the National President of the Jai Kisan Andolan, Avik Saha. Mr. Saha, let's start with India's decision to sharply reduce or even eliminate duties on US soya bean oil. My first question is, isn't soya in America a genetically modified item?
Yes, absolutely. According to the USDA, 94% of the soya in US, acreage-wise, is GM. So the fun part is the 6% that is not is reserved for premium and the luxury segment. So yes, it is completely GM.
So the soya oil that India will be importing will have been made from genetically modified soya beans.
So far as the US soybeans are concerned, there's nothing other than genetically modified soybeans, as I just said.
In which case, the key question is, do genetically modified elements of the original soya remain in soybean oil? Research, as far as I can tell, suggests we don't have a clear and decisive answer. Some scientists say it's eliminated, others say it's only reduced. What do you believe is the case?
Well, I'm no scientist, but let me read out a little bit of what the science on this is actually. So the GM elements in the soybean will remain in the GM soya oil, but we first have to understand the expression elements. See, when we talk about elements, we are talking about the cell. It's true that through the process of processing of the oil from the soybean, uh, non-protein compounds like lipids do not get removed. So the key point is that the transgene, the gene that has been introduced into the natural gene to make the GM, some parts of it are not detectable. Maybe the DNA, the RNA, some of the enzymes and proteins are not detectable. And scientists therefore can say, oh, well, this is not GM anymore. But once the transgene has been introduced, the entire effect of the transgene cannot be removed by any process. So, no, the GM soya will remain GM, especially in terms of lipids and other important compounds. And that has very, very deleterious effects on human health, as studies have shown.
So, just to underline that point, a substantial amount or a small amount, we don't know which, of the GM element will continue to remain in soybean oil.
Yes, it will.
Then let me put this to you. To the extent genetically modified elements remain in soybean oil, they will be consumed and they will then become part of Indian diet, won't they?
Yes, absolutely. If this is allowed, the unsafe GM soy oil with herbicide residues imported from the US will endanger the human food chain in India and the food safety.
Now, the truth, Mr. Saha, is that India has also been importing soybean oil from countries like Argentina and Brazil, and it's been importing this oil, I believe, for almost 20 years. Now, Argentinian and Brazilian soybeans are also genetically modified. So, to the extent their oil contains GM traces, those traces have already entered our food chain and our diet, and they entered probably 20 years ago.
Yes, this is true. But in 2007, when it was first allowed, it was a one-time approval. And that permission was given by the Director General of Foreign Trade, bypassing the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. After that, it just became habit. The floodgates were opened. But even then, the oil that is coming in from Brazil and Argentina is a very small part of the oil that humans in India consume. The import is largely palm oil. And now, with this new proposal from the US, you are going to flood the market with GM soy oil. So, while we were consuming a small part of the GM oil without really understanding its toxic effects, now we are saying that GM oil is perfect and which will be largely the oil that Indians will now consume.
You're making a very important point, Mr. Saha. When we were only importing soybean oil from Brazil and Argentina, the quantity imported was just a small proportion of the cooking oil used in India. But now that we will be importing soybean oil from America, the quantity will be much larger, and therefore the danger done to the Indian people, because it will be part of their food chain, it will be part of their diet, will be that much greater. Isn't that right?
Absolutely, absolutely, Mr. Thapar.
Now, something else that I discover is that India itself produces cottonseed oil, which I'm told is widely sold in Gujarat. And Indian cotton, as you know, is genetically modified. So, to the extent its oil contains GM traces, they've already entered our food chain and our diet, haven't they? That's a second source of entry.
Based on the current regulations, selling or consuming BT cottonseed oil for human beings is not permitted by FSSAI, and therefore the sale is illegal. So that speaks volumes about the amount of control we have on our food chain through regulatory mechanisms. And now you're introducing GM oil. So, well, yes, while this is unfortunately true, it's also illegal.
So
But it is
something that is
frequently.
something that is illegal has actually been happening and has been happening for nearly 20 years. And that means that GM elements through cotton oil, cottonseed oil, have entered the food chain and been consumed by Indians.
Yes, sir. But normalizing the illegal doesn't make it legal, does it?
But it remains dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous. And now we are making legal what was illegal and what continues to be very harmful and unsafe for human consumption.
Let's at this point sum up what we've clarified. A, soya bean oil will contain traces of GM material. We may not know how much, but it will contain traces. Those traces could be dangerous for human consumption, or so at least we believe in India, and that will be therefore part of the food chain and part of the diet of the Indian people. Secondly, we've been importing for 20 years soybean oil from Brazil and Argentina, which has the same GM traces. And now we have our own cottonseed oil, which is widely consumed in Gujarat, which also has the same traces, which you say is additionally illegal to sell. So we have a very interesting situation. We have GM traces coming into the food chain in India, A, through the import of soybean oil from America, B, through the import of soybean oil from Brazil and Argentina, and C, through the use of cottonseed oil within India, particularly in Gujarat. That is a perplexing situation, but that is the truth, isn't it?
Yes, it is the truth, but your viewers must know that there is no study on the effect of GM food on human being health anywhere in Southeast Asia. On the contrary, studies have shown, and this is important for Indians, that consumption of food material with GM and specifically soybean oil has great impact on our pancreas, the islets of Langerhans. I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, which is a very widely discussed health topic in India. So we are importing GM soy oil, which in experiments on laboratory rats have shown to affect or increase the diabetic conditions, type 2 diabetic conditions in mammals like human beings.
And
That is
Indians
the
are
risk
said
we
to
are
be,
taking.
and Indians are said to be particularly prone to diabetes.
Yes. Have we not been discussing the diabetes epidemic for the last 20 years? And does it somehow not coincide with the import of GM soy oil from Brazil and Argentina?
Absolutely. Let's, Mr. Saha, now come to what's called dried distillers grains, which India has also agreed to reduce duties on, either substantially or perhaps even to eliminate them altogether. In America, DDGs are the residue of ethanol made from corn, which in America is a GM crop. So once again, American DDGs will contain GM traces, and when it's fed to Indian cattle or Indian poultry, it will enter the food chain that way, won't it?
Absolutely. So you are importing DDGs, there is a soluble part of it, from the US, made from GM corn grown in the US, feeding it to Indian cattle, cows, buffaloes, and Indian poultry, and expecting that GM not to enter the Indian food chain. I mean, how much more absurd and ridiculous can it be? So there is an attack on the Indian health and the Indian food chain, both from soy oil and from the DDGA, directly and indirectly. The oil we will consume ourselves directly, and through the animal feed, it will come to us. So we are becoming, rather than moving away from GM, we are becoming a GM fed country one way or the other.
Now, let me put this to you. When Piyush Goyal told a press conference on Saturday, and I'm quoting him, that no genetically modified items will enter India, he wasn't correct. Because as you just pointed out, both US soybean oil and US DDGs will contain GM traces and they will enter the food chain. They will become part of the Indian diet one way or the other.
I'm not sure if Mr. Goyal lied or he was misled. And I don't know which one is worse for India. Here is a man entrusted with responsibility to ensure that he represents the people of India, and what he's saying is exactly against the interest of the people of India. He is permitting, for what reasons and under what pressure, I don't know, GM food into India. He has crossed the red line that currently exists for GM in India, and GM is entering India. No, sorry, Mr. Goyal, you are not right, and perhaps, and most certainly, actually, you're not telling the truth.
So you're coming around to saying that he lied?
Well, he did. It's so clear, and it's in large, bold letters on the wall.
At this point, Mr. Saha, let's look at India's overall position on GM produce other than GM cotton. We don't want to directly import or cultivate GM produce, but we seem to be happy to import derivatives of GM produce like oil or DGCs, which could contain, or now we believe do contain, GM traces, and let them enter the food chain. Isn't this inconsistent? Indeed, let me go further and say, isn't this contradictory?
Inconsistent, contradictory, and counterintuitive. I have no idea why the government is doing this. European Union have taken, after a great deal of research, a cautious position on GM. You see, the GM debate is very simple. It's a modified form of food that we will consume. Is it safe? The only answer can come from research, from long-term research on its safety. The problem is all genes, all GM products are patented, and the patent holder will not allow you to study, to research the gene unless you agree to their condition that the research will first have to be studied by them, vetted by them, and then published. So basically, I am producing something, but I will not allow for human consumption, but I will not allow it to be tested or understood outside parameters that I set. That's the problem with GM. For all you know, if fair testing was permitted, GM could be completely safe. I don't know. But without testing, without intergenerational testing, actually, when it comes to food, after all, we eat things that have been tried by human beings for 10,000 years. This food is being pushed down our gullet for profit over people, and I will not, for one, forget the thalidomide incident in the 60s in the US. Safe, approved medicine was consumed by pregnant mothers, and there were 10,000 deformed children. This is our experience, our lived experience. We can't walk the GM path unless very, very stringent testing is done, and that testing is not being allowed to be done. I repeat, there is no health test done on GM food in Southeast Asia.
So we have a very interesting situation. We don't know, because the tests have not been done, whether GM whether GM produce in the food chain is dangerous or not. The Indian government's position is that it's unacceptable, and yet, presumably with his eyes open, the trade minister has permitted the import of GM soya bean oil and GM DDGs, and both of which will come in substantial quantity from America. The tariffs have been either substantially reduced or eliminated, and that means that they will eventually enter the food chain and enter the Indian diet. And that's the interesting situation we have. We just don't know the outcome, but the Indian government's official position that we are not permitting genetically modified items to enter India is, as you say, breached. As you said, the minister lied.
Yes, and somewhat sleepwalking, isn't it? So it's a choice for us. We see either somnambulism or we see surrender. I don't know which one is which.
My last question. As the president of the National Jai Kisan Andolan, what is your advice to the minister on this whole issue of GM food and GM derivatives?
This brings us back to this government again. Be consistent. This government is promoting natural farming in this country, exhorting farmers to give up toxic farming but at the same time, they are now subjecting the consumers to have dangerous food. So please keep cultivation of GM outside India, and please keep import of GM products outside India. Consider this because you believe in paramparagat kheti. You are promoting it. You believe that it is necessary for the country. You are spending taxpayers' money to promote it. Currently and topically, stop import of GM soya oil, stop import of GM corn-based DDGs. One important factor, other than health, is that the US crops are heavily subsidized. When you bring derivatives of that crop into the country, you are actually hurting and harming the interest of the Indian farmers, who in any case always struggle to get price. So other than the food safety aspect, you are also creating a potential economic hazard for the Indian farmer. Don't do it. There is another issue, which is, of course, not on the table right now because it's not very popularly discussed. The government of India itself has started gene editing experiments. These and are trying to introduce crops. Unfortunately, the reporting, the data that they supplied was found to be so absurd, so ecologically absurd, that it was rejected. This morning, Karan, there's a report in the Indian Express, I think, which says that because so much data against genetic studies are coming out, the ICAR has directed its officers not to interact with the media, not to issue documents, statements, etc. So if all this is so nice, so cushy, why so much hide and seek? What are you hiding?
Absolutely. Why want to keep the Indian people in the dark if there's nothing to hide? I thank you, Mr. Saha, for the interview you've given me. I thank you for sharing your concern and underlining it that if we import US made soya bean oil and US made DDGs, we are importing into the food chain genetic material. We don't know the quantity of that which will be imported, but it's likely to come in through these two products. And therefore, that means that the minister's claim that no genetically modified items will enter India, as you said, is either a lie or he has been misled. Thank you very much indeed. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe. And now, our next guest, the distinguished professor at ICRIER, Ashok Gulati.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Welcome back. I'm now joined by the distinguished professor at ICRIER and probably India's best-known agricultural expert, Ashok Gulati. Mr. Gulati, let's start with India's decision to sharply reduce or even eliminate duties on US soya bean oil. My first question is, isn't soya in America a genetically modified item?
Yes, soya almost, I would say 95% or even 100% in US is a GM product. Mhm.
So the soybean oil that we will be importing from America is
Mhm.
based upon GM produced soybeans.
Yes, that's right. Mhm.
Which leads me, Mr. Gulati, to the key question. Do genetically modified elements of the original soya remain in soybean oil? As far as I know, research suggests that we don't have a single clear decisive answer. Some scientists say it's eliminated, others say it's only reduced. I gather that the European Union Science Committee has come to the conclusion that it's reduced, it's not eliminated. What do you believe is the situation?
I would say you have done quite a bit of research in this area, and your conclusion is right that there is some difference of opinion depending upon the process that soya has to go through to get converted into soybean oil. There is a segment of scientists who feel that the GM part of it, the protein and the DNA thing, is not disturbed and it is totally eliminated in the oil. But as you are rightly saying, Europeans and many others also opine that it may be reduced significantly, may be negligible, but the traces can remain. So the oil question is somewhat uh, debatable, but there is no debate on the traces of it in what we call the de-oiled cake or DDGs. Those are definitely yes.
I'll come to DDGs in a moment's time. I'll stick to oil for now.
Mhm.
So, what you believe is the situation is
Mhm.
that genetic material may be reduced, but
Mhm.
traces of it will remain in soya bean oil.
Yeah, the question is how much of those traces and our food safety standards, they feel that soya oil can be consumed by humans and it doesn't pose any major problem as far as the GM component is concerned. And I've yet to see any scientific committee working out exactly whether the traces are 2%, 5%, 10%, or 0.2%. So at least I'm not aware of that scientific part.
But
But
whether it's
yes, it's a
2%,
debatable thing. Mhm.
whether it's 2%, 5%, or 10%,
Mhm.
traces are there. That's the point we're making.
Could be. I think European agency does say that, and but the Indian experts and the Food Safety Standards Authority, they have cleared it for human consumption that edible oil from soya or cottonseed oil doesn't pose any problem.
Well, whether it poses harmful or danger to the human who consumes it is another matter. But the
Yeah.
point I want to establish with you is this: to the extent genetically modified elements remain in soybean oil, they will be consumed and they will become part of the diet of the Indian people.
Yeah, it's a question, if you take the position that no traces are there, which is one extreme position, the other is very limited or negligible part remains there, traces are there. At the end of the round, you're concerned with its impact on the human health. And that so far it's a little grayish area, I would say, but majority feels it's very negligible or no, so no traces.
Now,
uh,
the truth, Mr. Gulati, and
mhm.
this is something that you have confirmed yourself in an interview you gave me in September, is
Mhm.
that India has been importing soybean oil from countries like Argentina and Brazil for
Yes,
perhaps as long as 20 years.
yes,
And the soybean grown in Argentina and Brazil is genetically modified.
yes,
So, to the extent their oil contains GM traces,
yeah,
those traces have already entered our food chain and our diet. Isn't that true?
yes, that's right. If their oils contain those traces. That's again an issue to be discussed of
But
how
if they
much.
contain those
Yes,
traces have entered our
then
food chain.
it's in our food system in any case.
And the second point that you told me in September, which is a very important point, is that India itself produces cottonseed oil, which,
Yes,
as you said in September, is sold in every third grocery store in Gujarat. Now,
yes,
Indian cotton is genetically modified.
yes,
So, to the extent its oil contains GM traces, those traces have also entered our food chain and our diet.
yes, very much.
So, in a very real sense, if
Mhm.
soybean oil imported from America introduces GM traces into the food chain, the truth is those traces were introduced into the food chain through soybean oil imported from Argentina and Brazil, and through our own cottonseed oil
Yes, for the last 20 years.
for the last 20 years.
Yes,
Let's now come to what you were mentioning a moment ago, dried distillers grains.
yeah,
Under the Indo US trade deal, India has agreed to reduce duties on DDGs, as they're called, either very substantially or to even eliminate them altogether. Now,
yeah,
in America, DDGs are the residue of ethanol made from corn, which in America is a GM crop. So,
yes,
once again, American DDGs will contain GM traces,
yes,
and when those DDGs are fed to Indian cattle and poultry,
yep,
those GM traces will enter the food chain.
yes. That's here in case of DDGs or our own what we call the de-oiled cake, DOC. Both have traces. So scientists tell us that in DOC as well as DDGs, uh, it is almost certain that there would be GM traces. But in case of oil, the opinion is somewhat divided, and if it is there, it's very low or negligible.
You're making a very important point, Mr. Gulati, and I'll underline that for the audience.
Mhm,
In the case of soybean oil,
mhm,
opinion is divided whether GM traces continue.
mhm.
If they do continue, it's probably minimal, and we
Right,
don't know what impact they'll have on health, but we believe that it will
right,
be a non deleterious impact.
right.
But soybean oil can contain traces, we just don't know for sure. But in
Mhm.
the case of DDGs, we know for sure that the traces are there. There's no
Yes.
doubt in the case of
I
DDGs.
think on that case, all the scientists agree, yes, there will be traces of GM.
All the scientists agree, so there's no dispute over
Majority,
DDGs.
I would say, I mean, all means
The
more than
majority.
90%, I would say that.
Let me then put a critical question to you.
Mhm,
When the Commerce and Trade Minister Piyush Goyal
mhm.
told a press conference on Saturday, and I'm quoting him, no genetically modified items will enter India, he wasn't correct. That they may be entering through soybean oil, there's a split opinion, but they're definitely entering through DDGs.
Yeah, when he is giving this overarching statement, I think what he is meaning is that direct corn and soybean, GM corn or GM soybean is not being imported. But I'm not sure whether he knows that DDGs may also have, and actually not may, but have GM traces.
He
Uh,
should know, shouldn't he?
well, I don't know. He's not a scientist, as I am not a scientist. So,
But he issued a categorical statement. I'm repeating it. No genetically modified items will enter India. We now know that DDGs contain genetically modified material.
well, it's a sort of feed material. So, through the feed to the food chain, it will enter.
Absolutely. Poultry will be eating it, cattle will
Yes,
be eating it, milk
right.
comes from cattle, and
Sure,
chicken comes from poultry, as do eggs.
sure, sure.
So he's not correct.
Well, if he is meaning that the direct soybean or corn imports are not allowed, the GM ones, the main commodity, but this is a sort of a residue co-product of ethanol process, which will be entering in a much milder form And but the traces of GM in this would be much less compared to the traces if directly corn or soybean was imported.
We don't know what Piyush Goyal meant. Only
Mhm.
Piyush Goyal can tell us what he meant. But I
Mhm.
can tell you what he said. And what he said, and I'm quoting it again, no genetically modified items will enter India. And clearly, in
Mhm.
the case of DDGs, they are entering India. You've
Yeah,
confirmed that.
yeah,
And it's quite possible that
yeah,
traces will enter through soybean oil as well. So,
yeah,
on both counts, he could be wrong. On one count, he's definitely wrong. On the other, he could be wrong.
yeah. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not also a scientist, but whatever I have read about science, DDGs as well as DOC. You're not talking of DOC because we have been using more of DOC de-oiled cake.
Quite right.
And the cottonseed de-oiled cake is being fed to the poultry or dairy industry.
Can I ask you this, Mr. Gulati?
Hmm.
When a minister makes a categoric statement,
Hmm.
should he not make absolutely sure he's correct? Is it acceptable for a minister to say something categorically and turn out to be wrong?
Well, that's there could be, his communication perhaps because the fear was about directly importing soybean and corn, and they are definitely GM products in US. So he has been able to negotiate not the entry of GM corn and GM soybean, but their processed material, which have very low traces of GM, have been allowed. So, from the negotiation point of view, I do feel he has played safe
But
relatively.
from the point of view of telling the Indian people the truth, the full truth, and only but the truth, he is
Mhm.
wrong. His words were no genetically modified items will enter India. And you have now categorically told me that in the case of DDGs, there will be genetically modified traces. There's no doubt about it. And in
Yeah,
the case of soybean oil, there could be. We
yeah,
just don't know for sure.
that's right.
All
That's
right.
what my position is, but I can also be wrong because I'm not a scientist, so we need to check more on that.
Let's at this point, Mr. Gulati, look at India's position on GM products
Hmm.
other than GM cotton.
Hmm.
We don't want to directly import or cultivate GM produce,
Hmm.
but we seem to be happy to import derivatives of GM produce,
Hmm.
like oil or DDGs,
Hmm.
which could contain GM traces. In fact,
Right.
we know now in the case of DDGs that they do contain GM traces,
Yes.
and we're happy for them to enter the food chain.
Right.
Isn't that inconsistent?
Yes. I mean, there are a lot of inconsistencies in our policies. And as in one of your earlier interviews, I had clearly said that, BT cotton, 95% of the cotton being grown in the country is GM. And through the BT cotton seed, all these are being fed to poultry industry and to dairy industry. So
And
it's
BT cotton oil is being fed to human beings.
yes, of course, of course.
So our position on
And our
GM,
refining process may not be as strong as perhaps in the US or EU or developed countries.
so the traces of GM in GM cottonseed oil would be greater than it would be in
That's
America.
right, quite possible.
So our position on
Mhm.
GM produce
Mhm.
and particularly GM produce derivatives
Yeah, derivatives. Yeah.
is
Mhm.
inconsistent.
Yeah, we can say that. It's not 100% true.
It's not 100% true.
I mean, the question is if in his mind while saying this, he was referring to GM corn and soybean, so that benefit of doubt we have to give to him. But as far as derivatives of DDGs, he never said that DDGs do not contain.
No, but what he said was no genetically modified items will enter India. And DDGs are a genetically modified item. It is entering India. It will probably enter India with substantially reduced subsidies or subsidies eliminated altogether. Vast quantities could enter India.
Yes, through DDGs, whatever my science tells me, they do have traces and therefore they will enter.
Tell me, Mr. Gulati, is the Indian position, in addition to being inconsistent, contradictory?
Sorry?
Is it contradictory, the Indian position?
I would say that, there are certain statements made for general consumption of the public, whereas if it is not harming human health, then gradually these things are allowed. My own personal opinion is why we have not allowed after BT cotton, even BT corn and GM soya. The position is that the GM corn and soya in US have 3 times higher productivity than India's productivity of corn and soybean. 3 times. Now, it is all because of technology. And if it has been declared safe for human consumption, if it is human consumption safe in US, you do your own tests also. And if your genetically engineering approval committee has approved that, and still if you don't allow them to be cultivated, there is something wrong. There is inconsistency in your science and your policy. And that's where I've been saying our own domestically, this GM mustard or BT brinjal that we developed are not allowed in India so far. Whereas, neighboring country like Bangladesh is using BT brinjal. So, and people are not dying there.
So there is inconsistency in
Yeah,
India's science and in India's policies.
that's right.
And the Indian people are the ones who are losing out as a result.
Well, I mean, farmers are losing out in a way because their productivity is 1/3 of the productivity that could have been.
So
And that
your advice to the minister is please get the science right.
I would say that when scientific tests have been done and GEAC has approved, then the policymakers must respect their own agencies which are scientific. The rest is all politics or ideology, it's not science. And unless your agriculture is science based, your future will remain bleak.
Mr. Gulati, thank you very much for the time you've given me. Thank you very much for sharing your understanding both of soybean oil and American DDGs. As you
Thank
said,
you.
there
Thank
is
you for
no
having
doubt
me.
that American DDGs carry traces of genetically modified material. There could be questions about soya oil, but some people believe soya oil does also contain traces of GM material. I thank you for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.